I'm Dr. Anthony Harper with Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska. So, Congressman, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
May I ask a couple of questions about the Torah Caucus?
Right.
And I know that's a big issue that I know you're involved with it. So, what is the Torah Caucus and what led to your involvement with it?
Well, I've always been pro-Israel, and I've also, I think every American should be very clear where they stand on anti-Semitism. So these two issues are very important to me. They're things I'm passionate about. So I've had a long time interest. As we were sharing earlier, my dad taught me when I was young that those who bless Israel will be blessed. And I saw anti-Semitism when I was in high school. And I'm not Jewish, but I saw a child or a kid my age being intimidated and picked on physically, and it stuck out in my brain. I never forgot that. So I carry this viewpoint with me. And when I got elected, I wanted to be known as a champion for the U.S.-Israeli relationship, and I've striven to do that. I'm going to go back to Israel here in about a month, by the way. So that's my background. And then we had an Orthodox Jewish group said, Don, we'd like to stand up this Torah Caucus. Would you be interested in being a part of it? And I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And they said, would you be interested in leading it? And I said, well, we ought to see if anybody else wants to lead it. But if nobody else wants to do it on the Republican side or Democrat side, I'll be glad to step into that. But the mission for the Torah Caucus was to be a supporter of Israel and a supporter of the U.S.-Israel relationship, and two, to have a clear opposition to anti-Semitism. And that's the two parts of the two things that define what we stand for in this caucus. And so when nobody else really stood, so they wanted to be the chair on it, I said I would do it. And the name of it came actually from our Orthodox Jewish friends. And I know some people have picked on it because of that name, but frankly, I'm less worried about the name. I think the mission's important. We stand by Israel and we oppose anti-Semitism. That's what we're about.
Well, those are so important issues. And I was going to ask you another question here about what is your involvement with restoring that Jewish cemetery? You know about the
Right.
Jewish cemetery in Vilnius, Lithuania, as far as specifically restoring it to its former glory
Right.
and protecting it from any construction on the side or putting a fence around it. So what is being done now, and is anything planned on protecting that cemetery?
So I'm the Baltic Security Caucus chair, and I've developed a lot of friendships in Lithuania and also Latvia and Estonia. And I think it's very important that America stay close to them because Russia's being so threatening right now. So I thought I could maybe use my voice and my friendship in a good way and just say, hey, we have concerns about the cemetery, being paved over or moved or, not treated with respectfully. That's very important to our Jewish American friends that have raised this issue. So my goal is just to bring it up, and I think the Lithuanians will be sensitive to it. Perhaps a lot of leadership doesn't even know about it. So I think if we engage, in a congenial way, saying, hey, this is important for a lot of Americans back home, I think they'll listen to that, but we'll see.
Have you seen that Save Vilna website about the cemetery? Save Vilna.
I've heard about it. I've not been on it, though. I would want to lie to you, but I've heard about it.
Okay. So you explained about the House Armed Services Committee, and more so you talked about the House Baltic Committee. What about your role on the House Armed Services Committee? Yeah,
right now I'm a member on the Armed Services Committee, and I think I'll be a chairman of a subcommittee next year. I've been told that, but we'll see. Can't really. You should wait till it actually happens. But I've been told I'll have a gavel next year if we're in the majority. And I believe in peace through strength. I think we've allowed some of our strategic forces atrophy. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that. But one of the things that we have worked on is ensuring that we have a strong military partnership with Israel. And by the way, it's a two-way street. It's a win-win for both countries. We gain from our relationship with Israel here too. So it's not just us providing weapons. No, they actually make improvements to a lot of stuff, like their seekers that they make, and we buy them back. And so it's been a good back and forth relationship. We both gain from it. We gain a lot of intelligence value from them as well. So my goal is to be a good voice on the Armed Services Committee in support of Israel.
Well, it's a blessing to be with, and we miss you, Dovin Haya.
Yes.
Great. We wish you could be here. Maybe next time you can join us here. And thank you for, for your help with protecting the cemetery and so many others in combating anti-Semitism. But I'm just curious about how you became interested in Jewish concerns and about anti-Semitism.
Well, I touched on just a little bit. My dad taught me at 5 years old. We had devotions every morning, and I wasn't a big fan of devotions every morning. You know, like, I didn't like going to church 3 days a week, but my dad had me do that. But one of the things I learned: those who bless Israel will be blessed. And my dad taught, for some reason, thought that was very important for me to learn as a child. He also talked about tithing and the importance of giving. The generous people receive generously, and those are like two important principles that my dad really imprinted on my brain, and that I think of right away when I think of my dad. And so I was always been taught to be pro-Israel, and then I went there at 15 with a high school group. And I was, I had head knowledge of the Holocaust because you read about it. But when I went through the Holocaust Memorial, that was in 1979, so it's the older one. You have the newer memorial now. But it personalized it to a degree that it was emotional. When I go through it, you finally realize what that means. 6 million moms and dads and boys and girls being murdered like that. So put a human face on it. And then I went to the Knesset that day when I was 15, and I don't know who it was. Somebody got on our bus or a tour and said, "We have the Knesset," and it was at the time of Tel Aviv, I believe. But we have the Knesset to ensure that what happened in 1940s in Germany never happens again. And I just, I just felt it. I just remember being on fire for that, and I've never lost that. And also, I had the honor of standing up long-range missile defense with Israel in 2009 and 10.
Wow.
So focused on Iran.
Have you heard the Israeli national anthem, Hatikva?
I probably have. I would
it's
be able
very
to,
moving for those that may have seen that movie Schindler's List.
Schindler's List, yes. Okay.
It's very emotional
right
about
at the very
this.
end. Yes.
So what are your plans in combating anti-Semitism in all of its forms? We've got the big issue is the two-state solution.
Yeah.
The Biden administration is pushing for dividing Israel. And then there's the Iran issue, of course, Palestinian Authority recently with all this violence on the Temple Mount.
Yep.
And then have you heard of the UN agency UNRWA?
Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, there's BDS and finally the Jewish cemetery desecration. So how have you been involved with, fighting anti-Semitism with that two-state solution? And
well, first of all, I was a co-sponsor and have been on BDS legislation, which is anti-Semitic. It's meant to isolate Israel. And a lot of people, when they talk about anti-Zionism, it's really a cover for anti-Semitism for many folks. That's what I found, particularly in the United States and some of our universities in particular. Also, I was a co-sponsor for the Taylor Force Act.
Oh, yes.
So that was important that we got that passed. And I think I've been able to help, I'm on bills to help synagogues get some resources to upgrade their security. Because obviously, the majority of the hate crimes in this country are against Jewish Americans, even though they're about 0.5% of the population. I mean, so in other words, there's obviously a lot of hate crimes being done towards our Jewish Americans, and our synagogues are being targeted. So we need to help support that with security. So I'm on that. But I think more than anything, we got to be clear, and I think Republicans got to be clear. We hate anti-Semitism when it comes from the right. The Democrats should be clear. They hate anti-Semitism when it comes from the left, whether it's in universities, whether it's in New York, inner city, where we see a lot of that going on. It should be wrong no matter where it comes from. And I see a lot of, blind spots. People want to poke over there, but we should say it's all bad. And so I just want to have my voice on this thing, and I don't care where it comes from, who does it. Anti-Semitism is wrong, it's repugnant, and we reject it.
So is your caucus how's your caucus involved with opposing that two-state solution? Is everyone in the caucus opposed to that?
I know I personally am. I have not caucused with them on this particular subject. Here's my view. You can't negotiate with someone who's not serious about peace and who is driven for the destruction of Israel as the Jewish state. They have to accept Israel as a Jewish state.
Yes.
And they have to say no. They have to get rid of the right of return, because that's all that is intended to do is to make the Jewish folks in Israel a minority. That's the goal of that, right? And so there's not a legitimate negotiating partner right now, and that's been my position.
And about the UNRWA issue, I just briefly mentioned that's that UN agency that's been citing cases of violence against the Jews. The Biden administration has been wanting to refund that, but from my understanding, the monies are being held up so it doesn't go there. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I just don't. Big picture, the UN, they want to focus on Israel all the time.
Oh yeah.
What about the Uyghurs in China?
Yeah,
what about
them?
Yeah. What about what the Russians are doing in Ukraine? They're stopping that right now because they're on the security. They're a permanent member of the Security Council. Yeah. But there's so many blatant human rights abuses, but yet they focus on Israel, and it's wrong.
Yeah, so finally about the cemetery. So specific, what plans can be implemented to protect that cemetery?
We'll engage with the leaders of Lithuania and ask them to reconsider. I think we're doing my goal is to do it in a kind, diplomatic manner,
course,
and hopefully we can. I think we can, because they're sensitive to us on this. So I think they will listen and hopefully they'll heed our concerns.
You know, before they've been talking about, just respecting the Jewish people and maybe putting a museum over the cemetery, but for the Jewish people, any type of construction on that cemetery, the graves is a desecration.
I agree.
So, very, very troubling issue. But finally, so have you heard of the Jewish press article from Washington to Shnipshok? I don't know.
Not offhand.
But you can see that later. But it's titled "The Role of Torah Caucus in Helping to Save the Hallowed Shnipshok Cemetery in Vilna."
It wasn't on the website, but I did read it. But our mission is to promote a stronger relationship with Israel and to be very clear where we stand when it comes to anti-Semitism. That there's no ambiguity. It's morally repugnant, and you can't just say it once. This is something you got to repeat, and because that's how the message will win in the end.
I was going to say that something that we mutually have in common is the Air Force.
Right? Aim high.
Because I was in the Air Force and I'm trying to get back in as a chaplain. But
that's wonderful.
Thank you for your service in the Air Force.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. And thank you for listening today. And pray for Israel, for the peace of Jerusalem.
Yes.
Thank you.